You're watching CoinDesk. This next interview is one of the highlights from Consensus 2025.
Hey folks, amazing to be almost done with our first day at Consensus. It's been a busy day so far. We've talked about stable coins a lot and the role of the states in regulation, prosecution of software developers, how to head off truly bad actors, and we've now got a guy who's going to bring it all together for us, going to close it out for us. So we're honored and lucky to have a White House official cross into foreign territory today. Bo Hines, the executive director of the President's Council of Advisors on Digital Assets. Did I get that right?
You got it right. It's not the sexiest acronym, but it gets the job done. So
it's a heck of a title. It's a bit of a long one, but basically you're the I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're the administration's sort of liaison for crypto, working beside crypto czar David Sachs, basically trying to move U.S. digital assets regulation forward. Am I getting that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So welcome, Bo. Thanks so much for joining us at Consensus. We appreciate it. So before we get started, by applause, if I could, I'm curious about this. Who here is from Canada? Canadians? Okay. And how about from the States?
It's a good mix.
Kind of a mix there.
It is,
but,
yeah.
Anyway, there is a considerable constituency for you out, the U.S. people out there. Obviously, this is, we're going to be a bit U.S.-centric on this discussion for obvious reasons. So, and of course, U.S. policy will help steer the rest of the world's when we finally get around to it, right?
That's our goal, certainly.
So we have a short time to tap your knowledge here. I'd like to get an idea of sort of where you're coming from on crypto. Where did you first get interested, and people love this question. Had you personally invested anything in this space?
Yeah, I know it's a great question, and I have a pretty fascinating story as it relates to this space. I was actually a college football player at North Carolina State University my freshman year in college, and I had the privilege to play in the St. Petersburg Bitcoin Bowl. And the marketing worked. Lo and behold, it sparked my interest in cryptocurrency and digital asset technology more generally. I became a pretty avid trader and retail investor from that point forward. And this was, back in the day when a lot of this technology and change was considered uncouth, right? But I had a good group of friends up at Yale, and we kind of banded together and started to sort through a lot of this. And, we came to the conclusion that this technology could certainly revolutionize the way our financial marketplace works. And I ended up going to law school at Wake Forest back home in North Carolina upon graduating from Yale. And I had the privilege to study under Professor Renee Hawk, and that is an intentional shout out for her at Wake Forest University School of Law. She led courses in blockchain and internet law. And this also, with no clear regulatory environment, you might be asking, well, what were you studying? And we were studying the practical applications of what a clear regulatory regime would look like. And those courses certainly kept me in tune with what was going on in the space. I ended up becoming a general partner in a growth equity firm in Charlotte, but did not have a digital assets vertical inside of that firm. Stayed very involved just from the retail perspective. And when the transition rolled around, I knew a lot of the folks in the Trump orbit from the days when I ran for Congress in North Carolina's 13th district. Unfortunately, fell just about a point short in that race, but it's led me to where I am today, and I'm ever so thankful for that. But they had reached out and said, "Are you willing to come in and help us, shape what this regulatory regime would look like and help us deliver on the president's promises to make the United States the crypto capital of the world?" And I said, "Absolutely." Couldn't think of a better opportunity, and I ended up, we had a meeting of the minds between myself and our AI and crypto czar, David Sachs, who is a brilliant human being in his own right. I think his reputation precedes him with all of his success with his business ventures and so on. But we started mapping out what this would look like. And I think that, we're well on our way of achieving the president's goal, but there's still a lot of work to do.
So I described you as a sort of a liaison, White House liaison to crypto writ large, but how would you describe your day-to-day sort of broadly so they understand, folks understand what you do?
Yeah, so I mean, I view my office as basically being an administrator and or Sherpa between White House policy, industry, interagency activity, and what's happening on Capitol Hill. You know, we felt like the lack of progress that the industry had in terms of setting clear regulatory standards was in large part due to the lack of consensus that was there. There was no nucleus to pull it all together, and we felt like this office could, you know, be the tip of the spear in doing that. And I think that we've successfully done that thus far with a lot of different activity happening amongst interagency actors. And you know, obviously we have a dream team built out in this administration for the digital asset space with, you know, Hester and Paul over at the SEC, with Brian coming in at the CFTC. I'd be remiss not to mention Secretary Lutnick, Secretary Bessent, phenomenal actors for this space. It makes my life a heck of a lot easier, and that's, you know, a testament to President Trump. You know, I've told people many times that, you know, in this administration, I think that we're finally testing a theory that a lot of folks have had, at least in the US, is what would happen if you took private sector actors that have built and developed and sold businesses and injected them into a bureaucratic system. And I think that we're finding out that, you know, we can make this system work. You know, David likes to say that we're moving at tech speed, and I would like to second that. I think that we're moving extremely quickly and effectively for that matter. But, you know, with the president's working group that he established in his first digital assets EO, this gives us a streamlined process to, you know, engage in the activity that's necessary to provide guidance and clarity.
Well, speaking of speed and its antithesis, we're dealing with the Senate right now. What has been like, I guess you could describe as a bit of a roadblock for crypto legislation in the past, and it looked like things were going pretty well. So this is, you know, arguably the biggest point of current affairs in crypto policy right now is the stablecoin bill, the bill to regulate U.S. stablecoin issuers. The Senate has been dealing with this bill. It got a little bit off track. There was a procedural, you know, impediment to it in the Senate. We would hope to hear the latest on that, with the understanding that there may be floor consideration tomorrow. We're hearing very recently on the latest version of this bill.
Yeah, we shall see. You know, negotiations are ongoing, and just to pull this, you know, backwards ever so slightly, you know, last week we did have the failed cloture vote, and many viewed this as certainly an impediment, but, you know, I remain steadfast in my optimism that we're going to achieve the president's desires to both put stablecoin legislation and market structure legislation on his desk before August recess. And I say that because of the good faith negotiations that are ongoing in a bipartisan way currently in the Senate as it relates to the Genius Act. I think that they've come together and pulled this bill to a place to where we actually get to the best outcome. And, you know, our colleagues up on the Hill recognize how important this is to the United States of America and the world more generally. And we're talking about updating very archaic payment rails that have existed for quite some time. We're talking about, you know, creating a world in which payments are much more expeditious with instant settlement times, much more cost effective, and much more transparent. You know, this should be extremely nonpartisan in nature. And that's, you know, a lot of the frustration that the American people have, especially, is when issues like this arise, where we're dealing with something that we should be able to come together on and push forward because, you know, it's to the benefit of all Americans. There's really nothing partisan about it. And, you know, my challenge to, you know, my colleagues on the Republican side and the Democratic colleagues over the course of the next couple of days is let's get this thing home. It's time. The traditional financial players are ready for adoption. We're ready to integrate these technologies, and we're ready to revolutionize the way in which our financial marketplace works.
Well, it certainly looked like it was on fire when it was coming out of the, not to get too procedurally, but out of the Senate Banking Committee, had a very strong bipartisan vote. Obviously, there's, you know, it hit this speed bump. But before I sort of ask a little bit more about that, if you were in the, you know, crypto loves the prediction markets, so you were laying a bet, Genius Act clears the Senate by the end of the month. What do you think?
That's a tough
Too
question
ambitious?
there, Jesse. I don't think it's too ambitious. Like I said, I mean, I remain optimistic it's going to get done. I think it's going to get done in short order. I'm very confident with where things stand currently, but this is an evolving process, and I'm sure I'll have more updates as soon as I get off the stage. But I just want to thank our leaders in the Senate. Senator Haggerty has done a phenomenal job. Luke on his staff, who's had the pen for most of this and worked diligently to get this to a place that is palatable for both sides, has been extremely effective. And now that we're finally in a place in which we can have good faith conversations and negotiations, and we know exactly what the other side is looking for, it allows us to achieve the best result. And that's where I can say we currently are, is that we're actually having those conversations in real time as we sit on this stage. And that puts us in a good place to get it home. So I remain extremely confident in the fact that they'll get it pushed through, and we'll see where it goes from there. But we'd love to see it on the president's desk in short order.
In Washington, still talking is good.
That's right.
Yeah,
when the talking ceases to happen, that's when you're in bad shape. But we're not there.
In the House of Representatives, the discussion draft is out for the replacement for last session's FIT 21 bill that many people may be familiar with, the legislation to install regulatory guardrails for the crypto markets in the U.S. So, cart before the horse maybe, but where are we on that?
Well, look, we'll make a sequencing decision in short order about how these things should proceed, but we have to see what plays out in the Senate this week and over the course of the next couple of weeks. With that being said, we are absolutely adamant that both stablecoin legislation and market structure legislation need to be signed into law very quickly. One cannot be left behind. There's absolutely zero option for that from the administration's perspective. These things have to run together. That doesn't mean they have to be sequenced together. It just means that we need both, and we need to get them both done and signed into law. So I'm very pleased with where that draft sits. I think it's a much improved version of FIT 21 that we saw in the last Congress, and that's truly a testament to the writers that are working out of House Financial Services and House Ag on that side in that chamber. But I think this is a phenomenal starting point as the foundation to jumpstart conversation as they move this thing into markup. We'll certainly be there to Sherpa this along and get industry feedback and help to inject those comments into the conversation.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, who it was, I think French Hill said from this venue that called them peanut butter and jelly, the two bills. So obviously they go together. So how much should people be concerned that the resistance developing for the stablecoin legislation in the Senate will be even worse for the more complex and sort of wide-ranging market structure bill it's meant to govern all of U.S. crypto?
Well, I mean, there's certainly conflicts of interest amongst industry actors on very minute issues that exist within these pieces of legislation. I think that one thing that we've proven with the Genius Act is that we're able to thread the needle to pull industry actors together. One thing that's worth noting is that with Genius, it's the first time ever you've had all three major trades come out and support a piece of crypto legislation in the United States. I think you've seen industry coalesce, all of industry coalesce behind it, including the folks that are competitors in that space and really just go head to head. So, I mean, again, that brings us to the conversation of why can't we get this through? You would think if competitors in the industry can agree upon the text, then our Democratic colleagues should as well. But we understand where they're coming from, and we've done our utmost to make concessions that allow them to get more comfortable with the language, and I think that we're there. But with market structure, to answer your question more directly, this is going to be a drawn-out conversation that takes place over the course of a couple months, and we'll be able to consolidate feedback from industry and attempt to thread that same needle there. And so long as we can get all of industry pushing behind this, I think that we'll be in a really good place. I think the problem with pushing legislation, we all know it's very hard in the United States with anything. I mean, that's how the system is built. That's how it's designed. But with digital assets more generally, there's a knowledge gap that exists. I mean, this is new technology. It's scary for a lot of people when you're only seeing headlines that are negative, like we saw under the Biden regime, in which people are positioning the industry as being a facilitator of illicit activity. it puts you in a tough place with people who don't understand how important this technology is. Now, we all know that that's not the case. We all know how important this technology is to be integrated into the traditional financial systems. Even those players recognize the unlock that this could provide in terms of revolutionizing the way that things work, and they're ready for adoption. I mean, that's one thing to point out as well, is these TradFi folks are banging down our door, trying to figure out what the timelines are, trying to figure out who the best players to interact with are in the digital asset space. And the unlock to that was what the president did with the first digital asset CEO. But I'll pause there because I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah. So the Democrats who've come out to oppose the stablecoins effort, many of whom were in favor of advancing it out of committee, as we noted, have raised objections to the president's personal stake in the crypto industry and whether it presents conflict of interest. So what's the White House's response on that?
There is absolutely zero conflict of interest that exists. And I'll say this, the president's family has the right to engage in this industry like any other U.S. citizen, period. The president is focused on delivering on his promises that he made on the campaign trail to the American people. In the first 100 some odd days, he's delivered on a lot of them, which should be really exciting, not only for Americans, but for the rest of the globe, and just unleashing what this economy can do. And I'm talking about the global economy, not just the American economy. Obviously, our capital markets are in a very good place as we watch these tariff negotiations and trade negotiations play themselves out. We want to establish ourselves as the leader in digital asset financial technology more generally. And I think the fact that his sons are engaging in this is a good sign. If you're a good entrepreneur, my advice to you would be look for ways to get involved in this industry, because this is the next generation of finance, period. And if you're not thinking about ways to get involved, then you're probably not a very good business person.
So you think it's unfair to suggest the president can be influenced by outside parties based on this sort of crypto business interest?
I think it's absolutely unfair. I mean, look, if the president's family was engaged in real estate or any other place, you wouldn't hear anything about it. But the U.S. government certainly has interest in those things as well. Crypto has been treated unfairly for quite some time. And we saw this under the Biden regime with basically lawfare. They've been targeted in a way that no other industry ever has been. We like to call it blue tape. It's traditionally called red tape. You start talking about some of these regulatory structures that were set up that were enormous roadblocks, a lot of which undergirded the Operation Choke Point 2.0. And the president has made it very clear, both at the White House Crypto Summit that we had, which was a monumental step in recognizing industry for what they've been able to accomplish in the midst of headwinds, that we need to eradicate anything that undergirds Operation Choke Point and free up the traditional players from interacting with digital asset firms. And that's something that we're consistently focused on.
How, and I'll move on to the executive order and Bitcoin reserve, because I know people want to talk about that, but how are the Democrats going to be brought back to the table who are raising these concerns? Or maybe they already have.
Look, they understand how
getting a vote tomorrow.
They understand how important this is for the American people. They understand how important this is for the U.S. to lead the charge in this space. This has nothing to do with anything else that's going on with one individual. This can have a macro and global impact in a way that we can't even possibly fathom. When you start talking about stablecoin adoption, what it does for U.S. dollar global dominance is enormous. You talk about the foundation of what you can build. In terms of creating these new payment rails, you're looking at tokenization of public securities, talking about the ways in which markets move and operate changing completely over the course of the next few years. That's too important of an unlock for us not to get home on this. And I'd like to see our Democratic colleagues put away political gamesmanship and move forward here and get this done for the American people.
So let's get on to this other biggie here. So President Trump put out an executive order that called for a Bitcoin reserve and a separate stockpile of other crypto assets. Those funds are at first only meant to be assets that the government has on hand from seizures and the like.
In its current state.
In the current state. So before we get into the idea of other ways that Bitcoin may be raised, for the reserve, how's it going auditing the U.S. crypto holdings currently and getting this reserve off the ground in a more technical sense?
It's been a rather smooth process. Look, things oftentimes move slowly in government. I'd say not in this administration. There were clear outlined goals and dates set in that executive order in which the interagency actors have complied to. But if you look at the authority in terms of what's set up there, a lot of it falls underneath Treasury at this point. So, Treasury is tasked with the responsibility of actually setting up the SPR. They're also tasked with the responsibility of consolidating that report and providing that to the working group that basically describes what we're currently holding and where we plan to go from there. And then you include the Commerce Secretary as well that was mentioned in that executive order, as they're supposed to come up with budget neutral ways to accumulate as much Bitcoin as we possibly can. And I get asked by journalists constantly, how much Bitcoin do you want? I'm like, that is an extremely silly question. The fact of the matter is, we view Bitcoin as being unique. It's a commodity, not a security. It has intrinsic stored value. It has the immaculate conception. It's finite. We want as much as we can possibly get. And we want to do this in a way that benefits the American people. We want to do this in a way that harnesses that asset class. Bitcoin is digital gold, period. I can't say that enough. And we view it in our long-term interest to hold on to it and find ways to harness more. There's limitless ideas in terms of how we can do this, and I don't want to poison the well by speaking to the ones in which we'll move forward on, just as of yet.
Oh, I wasn't even going to ask you about
that.
But
I'm sure you weren't. But there are passionate players in the room that are very intelligent, as President Trump likes to say, the high IQ folks in the building that certainly have very good ideas. And look, it's not one size fits all. We can do this in numerous creative ways. And so we will probably end up moving expeditiously on those that we can enact more quickly, but we can start building out long-term strategies as well on top of that.
And you certainly wouldn't want to name, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 creative ways that this could be accomplished?
Not just yet.
I have to try. So, okay then, if we're not getting into specifics on it, who is making the call and how are they doing it?
Well, look, this is why the working group was set up, so that we can have these conversations amongst all the interagency players that have some sort of stake in this process. Obviously, the Treasury Secretary, obviously Secretary Lutnick at Commerce. These conversations involve numerous actors, including DOJ, who's a part of this working group, and others. We want to make sure that this asset that's stored is protected and secure. We want to make sure that we're finding ways that will provide longevity in the process. And so we'll come together and flesh out these ideas amongst the group, and then we'll have a consensus decision on how to proceed.
Let's get a sense of kind of the color of your working life. So you're inside the halls every day. Well, White House has a lot going on, from tariff negotiations, border security, what have you. Not to mention sort of partially dismantling some of the structures of the federal government, the executive branch. But in all that, that's a lot going on. In all that, how much of a priority is crypto? I know it's your job, right? So you're going to hear about it all the time. But how much of a priority is crypto, which is admittedly a small corner of finance at this stage?
Well, I think with Genius moving forward and the regulatory environment that we're going to build and the integration of these technologies into the traditional financial system, it's going to be a much larger part of our economy very quickly. I think the president certainly understands that. He's the first openly pro-crypto president that we've ever had. He certainly understands the necessity to move on these things, which is why he's pushed to have these legislative priorities move forward in the first year of this administration. Our colleagues on the Hill understand how important this is for us and how important it is for the president. And so, it is a large part of the conversation that's happening in the building. We view this as a way to, unlock new technology for U.S. capital markets, and we're very proud of the ingenuity of the American people and their ability to integrate these technologies, their ability to be forward-thinking. We want to give them all the tools at their disposal to build and create and innovate in the United States. Like my message to folks that have gone offshore is welcome home. We are going to create the cleanest and most robust regulatory environment that could possibly exist for digital assets in the United States of America. And we're going to do it very quickly, and we're going to do it on the president's timeline.
I think people a lot of times think of those who work at the White House being sort of, maybe they watched West Wing or something like that, being sort of in the Oval Office all the time, in and out of the Oval Office constantly. But now we did see the president have the summit, the crypto summit at the White House, which you were, I'm sure, part of organizing. I think I spoke with you there, but yep. It's like how involved is President Trump in the crypto initiative? Do you talk to him on any kind of regular basis, or how does that work?
Well, look, there are certainly conversations that are constantly ongoing as the legislative process plays out. There's other offices in the White House that have stake in this. Start talking about the NEC, National Economic Council, great folks there. Kevin Hassett, at the helm over there is phenomenal as it relates to digital assets as well. We have OLA, the Office of Legislative Affairs. We have OMB inside of the White House. All of these players are constantly having conversations with us about how do we move this agenda forward. And then, the president's certainly invested in seeing, a major priority of his get across the finish line. And so, these conversations happen on a daily basis, and part of that is soliciting feedback from industry. And the one thing that I did want to mention, because I know we have about 4 minutes here, is that we certainly believe in industry's ability to teach and educate, especially government actors, whether it be interagency actors and/or legislators on the Hill. And the president gave us broad discretion in terms of how we take industry feedback in. And I think that's given us, the tools that we need to get to the best, outcomes in terms of what the legislation should look like, in terms of the pain points for industry as it relates to rules and regulations amongst interagency actors. It truly is remarkable. In the first, 100 days, I probably had no less than 200 meetings with different industry players. Just soliciting feedback, understanding what their concerns were. As a private sector guy my entire life, I'm very keen on the idea that industry knows best. We need to hear from them and learn from them. And that's not just the Goliaths in the space. This is about learning from builders and startups and people at different stages of development of their enterprises. There's different pain points for each of these folks, and all of those needs need to be addressed in order to create the most pro-crypto friendly environment we possibly can and welcome innovation.
There were certainly a lot of people in the room for that summit, but I'm sure a lot of people. Would anyone want to go to a second summit? Anyone here? Yeah, no, oh, no, you don't have to have another one. Are you sure? It was, okay. Never mind, you don't have to plan another one. Is there another one?
So the way that
the
way that we've discussed this is, pairing this as the legislative priorities move forward and we start working towards this 180-day landmark that was laid out in the first digital assets executive order. For those of you that don't know, it references a report that we have to produce for the president that is a comprehensive look at what the cleanest regulatory environment would look like from the interagency perspective. And obviously we want to work with our colleagues in the Hill to do that. We view it as a means that the legislative process runs its course, to fill in the gaps that might still exist so that there's, immense clarity and there's no stone left unturned. So with that, we'll certainly have, in my opinion, as we continue to flesh this out, probably sub-vertical summits in which we pull industry actors in from different verticals in the space. You can bring exchanges in one time, you can bring miners and energy firms in one time, just so we're actually hitting, and understanding exactly what the pain points are for each category of the industry and being able to address those needs independently.
Now, the U.S. regulatory agencies, such as the Securities and Exchange Commission and the others, they seem to be sort of exploring their own paths with the industry as they await congressional action. Are you for your job, are you in communication with the agencies too on what can be done without the new laws?
Absolutely. Look, this report that we're comprising and working on amongst our group is all-encompassing. When we'll talk about stables, talk about market structure, we'll talk about everything that needs to be done and what we can accomplish through interagency activity. And going back to this first digital assets executive order, it was penned this way for a reason. We had the 30-day landmark, which compelled these actors to do an internal audit or review of any rule or reg that they touched in the space that affected digital assets more generally. The 60-day landmark compelled the same actors to produce a list of recommendations of what things they could do independently to get us in a cleaner environment. We were hoping through this process, and we've seen this happen just through the guidance and the rescissions and the lawfare that's been eradicated. They're making our life easier with the report. It's less that we have to address. And with these actors that are currently in their roles, they're doing a phenomenal job of doing that. This report continues to shrink by the day. We're hoping that a 200-page report may only have to be a 50-page report. But we'll see, and we'll get there.
So you've, as you indicated, probably met with a couple of hundred of the people here at Consensus today. But are you still taking those meetings with crypto execs and founders? And if so, how should they approach you?
Absolutely. So the best way to reach out to me would be through the OPL office at the White House, the Office of Public Liaison. They'll happily set up meetings for us, and please do reach out. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your concerns on market structure as we move forward in this process. We want to hear about your pain points that you're dealing with in the industry, and use us as a resource to be that Sherpa, that administrator that can pull everyone together and voice your concerns for you.
Well, that is our time, unfortunately. Thanks so much for being with us at Consensus, Bo. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse.
Give Bo a hand.